We've been using various web hosts for decades, and we've always found common denominators that connect most of them. For example, most hosting platforms rely heavily on cPanel. The reason is simple. It is the de facto standard tool for building and managing websites. It's user-friendly, mostly point and click, and allows almost anyone to deploy a site without needing advanced administrator skills. When we set out to test AccuWeb hosting, we were glad to see that they stuck to using these industry standard tools for some of their plans. However, other plans turned out to be another story altogether. We wanted to see exactly how well AccuWeb hosting fares compared to the countless other services we've tried, so we bought a few plans and put them to the test. The first thing that we noticed was their starting price. At just over $1 a month, it is quite affordable, so we immediately decided to see what such a cheap plan actually entails. The entry-level Linux shared budget plan includes one website, 10 GB of storage, 25 GB of bandwidth, and a free SSL certificate. However, it only comes with 500 MB of RAM. In our experience, that's not enough to run a site that gets even moderate amounts of traffic. Fortunately, there are other budget tiers available. For a few dollars more, the premium tier bumps you up to 1.5 GB of RAM, 75 GB of storage, and includes free domain registration. For our money, this is the best option because it gives you plenty of resources while keeping your monthly costs incredibly low. Signing up was simple enough, and we immediately got an email to set up our cPanel credentials. But when we got to actually building the site, we ran into a bit of a wall. We attempted to build a WordPress site using the Softaculous app installer, which went exactly according to plan. But when we tried to access the WordPress admin panel, we received a 404 error indicating the site couldn't be reached. We dug around and realized it was a DNS issue, despite the domain already pointing to the proper servers. This is where things started to fall apart. We tried to start a live chat with support, only to discover that real-time chat wasn't available for the budget plan. We were given an email address instead. 20 minutes after sending an email, we were told that our plan was apparently self-supporting, meaning that no help was coming. If your technical skills are limited, this complete lack of support immediately disqualifies the budget plan. We did manage to find workarounds though. There is a site publisher tool inside cPanel that offers basic templates, though it is a very manual and limiting approach compared to Softaculous. Once we finally resolved our own DNS issues, the standard WordPress installation worked perfectly and took about 3 minutes. We checked the performance using GTmetrix and the numbers were pretty impressive for a basic site. However, when we manually timed how quickly the pages would render in various browsers, a simple page took over a second, and a slightly more complex site took nearly 2 seconds. If a basic page takes that long to render, it doesn't really speak too highly of the server's raw power under a heavier load. We would only recommend this budget plan if you know how to resolve your own technical hurdles. Next, we move to a Windows VPS plan, which is a different beast entirely. Where the budget plan gives you the safety and simplicity of cPanel, the VPS plan requires you to use a remote viewer to access a raw Windows Server instance. If you don't have a solid understanding of Windows Server administration, you won't survive this plan. Signing up was a bit clunky as the AccuWeb website itself was lagging heavily during checkout, but eventually we got our remote desktop protocol credentials and logged in. As longtime Linux users, getting a website published using Windows Server was grueling. We had to manually install the web server through the Server Manager wizard, which takes several minutes. Then we had to download and install MySQL and PHP. To save our sanity, we opted for a prepackaged WAMP server, but even that required tracking down and installing specific Microsoft Visual C packages first. We had to manually extract the WordPress files into the document root, navigate to the localhost, and use phpMyAdmin to manually create a database and assign user privileges. Only after all that manual configuration could we finally run the famous WordPress installation wizard. It is an incredibly tedious process compared to a simple one-click install. Sadly, this is where our VPS test completely failed. After getting everything set up and running locally on the server, we found that the outside world couldn't actually access the website. We dropped every firewall on the Windows server to no avail. We couldn't access the site via the domain or the direct IP address. This led us back to customer support. Once again, support was entirely unable or unwilling to help, claiming it was a DNS issue because the domain was purchased elsewhere, even though the direct IP address itself was also unreachable. Support is undeniably the weakest link on this platform. After dealing with AccuWeb hosting for a few weeks, our takeaway is mixed. If you have a good deal of technical skill and just need dirt cheap cPanel environment, it's not a terrible service. You do get a lot of bang for your buck on the shared plans. However, the Windows VPS plan is far too problematic for anyone without serious server administration experience, and the customer support ranks at the very bottom of all of the web hosting services we've tested over the years. For those looking for a web host that makes things easy and the safety net of decent support, this is simply not the way to go.